So the question that poses itself is, how come? What happened? Marriage was always a sacred institution. Since time immemorial, it was always honored by Muslims and non-Muslims. Why in the contemporary modern world has there been such a reductive approach towards marriage? How come? Actually, let me ask you, brothers, what do you think? What's changed in the 21st century? Or let's say in modernity? Hookup culture. The element of identicality. Very good. What else? Social media. Shamelessness. Very good. Feminism. Absolutely.
The individual is more important.
Yeah, the individual is more important than the collective. Yeah, very good. I will share with you 3 reasons that seem to be behind the modern dismissive attitude towards marriage. And this is, I'm sure, part of the explanation, not the entire explanation. First of all, the rise of premarital relationships. Sexual intercourse, to be specific, before marriage, has a tangible effect on the quality of a marriage when they eventually choose to tie the knot. And there are studies to show this. You have the study of Professor Nicholas Wolfinger, a sociologist from Utah University. And he found the following in his study. He said that those who have only ever slept with their spouses, i.e. during a marriage, reported to be experiencing very happy marriages. And they were reported to have the happiest of all marriages. They scored the highest. Those who have had no sexual encounter before their spouse, they were at the top of the pyramid. And he said the most dissatisfied and upset and most likely to fail in a marriage were women who had 6 to 10 sexual partners before they eventually got married. They were the lowest and most likely to divorce. And he said it was a trend between both men and women. If you look at the graph, the more sexual partners they had before marriage, the more likely it was that they were going to end up in divorce later on in life. But it does not dip as low as it does with women. For some reason, his findings suggest that women are way more likely to be dissatisfied, discontent, and wanting to walk out of a marriage than men, even though it works both ways. And he says that perhaps it is very obvious that the more partners a person has had, the more likely the odds are that they are going to end up in a divorce later on in life. And other researchers like Andrew Cherlin from Johns Hopkins University, he's also a sociologist, he says similar matters, that those people who showed no interest in sexual contact before marriage meant that they were more likely to offer commitment to a spouse when they did get married, and therefore they were happier. Yeah, there's a lot of these studies to suggest that this is the relationship. So between premarital relations and the likelihood of a divorce later on in life. So I suggest that perhaps this is number one, or one of the reasons that explains part of the dismissive attitude that people have towards marriage today, because there's so much going on before marriage. The second reason is because of feminism, as one of the brothers, he said. We cannot pretend as Muslims we are somehow immune to their narrative. It affects us just as it affects others. When you have the likes of Shayla Cronin, who says that the path to the liberation and freedom of a woman is by first abolishing the institution of marriage. Marlene Dixon, who also says that the role of a wife is how the subjugation of a woman is maintained. And Simone de Beauvoir, the infamous feminist, who wrote in her book, The Second Sex, which is essentially the biblical reference for many feminists today, she writes that marriage is an alienating institution. So, of course, a lot of this is a reaction to their expressions of marriage and injustices that happen in this legal system and that social system, not in ours. So perhaps it's understandable why you're getting this extreme reaction. But the point is, these waves of feminism, they do affect us. And it does detract from the status of marriage in the eyes of people. A third reason is, and none of you mentioned this one. What am I going to say? Huh? غيره. Now, undoubtedly, satire, mockery, poking fun at marriage, joking about it. Yani subhanallah, more often than not, the husband will mock his wife will mock her husband, people will mock the institution of marriage. They say it's a light-hearted joke, take it easy. To the level where now the comedic trope of marriage is a couple who absolutely hate each other, right? And subhanallah, we wonder why children will say, I'm never going to get married. Have you heard a child who says that before? I'm never going to get married. How come? Why do you want to get married? Why do you feel the need to announce to the world your intention that you don't want to get married? How come? I mean, what is it? Has this child studied the first, second, third, fourth waves of feminism and the philosophy? No, you haven't done that. Maybe the child has studied the governing laws of marriage. No, the child hasn't done that. So why is the child saying, I'm never going to get married? How come? Simple reason. They've just made a quick observation. And all of the people who are married seem to absolutely hate one another. And all of the jokes about marriage is about hating your spouse. So why would the child want to get married? Why would the child want to do that? So joking, brothers, sisters, please take this seriously. Huh? So much garbage and nonsense is normalized via the vehicle of satire and mockery. Husband is mocking his wife. He's joking about her, My wife is so stupid, she doesn't understand algebra. She's so boring, she never wants to watch cricket with me. Wife mocking her husband, He's not the alpha male that I was expecting, right? Ever since he got married, his side handles are now flowing all over his waist. His love handles. Before that, tough man. With marriage, it makes him a big fat softie. And then husband is mocking his wife as well in public gatherings. My wife, they're always nagging. They're never happy. They always want more. What can I do? You can't keep up with them. And then husbands are also mocking their wives, speaking about how boring his wife is. She's always on her phone. God, this is what marriage does. We're always speaking to another. We got married. She's now always on her phone. What message are you sending out to the kids when they hear that? Right? And then the classic joke, right? Of a husband and wife planning an outing that does not include their spouse because the spouse is so boring. Can't wait to get away. Right? To do something adventurous and exciting because my spouse is so boring. What message are you sending to your children when they hear that? Really? And by the way, these jokes are far more offensive to women than they are to men, especially in our society. Because of the amount of bombardment that our women are receiving, that you as a homemaker, you've had to sacrifice all of your dreams and ambitions. That's what society is telling her. Then she gets home, and we are adding and compounding to that. You're just a homemaker. What do you know at the end of the day? It's hurtful. It's damaging. It has real consequences, brothers. So watch what you say. And what upsets me more is when you see our practicing brothers, sometimes our mashayikh, our teachers who are circulating some of these jokes about marriage. And one of the brothers who was delivering a seminar, we won't mention name or city, or delivering a class, this is the Islamic method of coaching for marriage and all of these big titles. And every now and then there'll be a joke about marriage, to lighten up the mood and get people laughing and concentrating again. But at the expense of marriage? And he will say things like, sisters, always keep a passport-sized photo of your husband in your wallet. Why? Because every time you go through a tough experience in your life, you take out that photo and you look at it and you say, if I can deal with that, then I can deal with anything else in life. People laugh and joke. It's light-hearted apparently. What message are you sending? Or this other one that one of our mashayikh, may Allah preserve him, circulated recently. Maybe it was a private group. And a brother who was going to explain to us the 3 rings of marriage. Have you seen this one, right? The 3 rings of marriage. And he's writing on a whiteboard. The first ring of marriage, this is the engagement ring. And then the second ring of marriage, this is the wedding ring. And then the third ring of marriage, this is suffering. Tayyib? Well, really, honestly, what message are you sending? Why would I want to be part of that? And what is sad is that this is happening at a time when the opposite of marriage is being glorified and enshrined within law. Homosexuality, lesbianism, promiscuity, sexual experimentation is glorified, magnified, encouraged, enshrined within law. And then the only halal outlet that we have to release ourselves emotionally, physically, is marriage. That only door that we have, we're knocking it down through our jokes. And then you wonder why, my kid, subhanAllah, doesn't want to get married. Delaying. Why? Because it's not appealing to them. It's not exciting anymore to get married. Why? So brothers and sisters, why is marriage sacred? Why is marriage sacred? Because Allah made it sacred. Because Allah told us that it's sacred. So when you joke about it, what message are you saying about yourself? You know that Allah has made it sacred. Yet you still find it easy to joke about something that Allah deems solemn. And then you will always get the exact same response, Ya akhi, we're just being light-hearted. Why are you taking everything so seriously? It's just a joke. I get that. But you're still wrong. Honestly, I really get it, but it's wrong. Because as Muslims, we don't believe, like we do here in the West, that comedy enjoys certain privileges that other type of discourse doesn't enjoy. With comedy, it's a little bit more of a free-for-all. As Muslims, we don't believe that. Comedy is also within the parameters of religion, like every other type of discourse. And even if we were to say that comedy has certain special privileges, those privileges do not extend to those things that Allah has made sacred. And marriage is one of those things, and Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has what? Has made sacred. Don't joke about it and don't mock it. I like the words of James J. Sexton, who was interviewed by Sean Illing. James Sexton, he is a divorce lawyer who's been in the field for about 20 years. And Sean Illing, in the interview, he says to him, what advice do you have for people who want to get married? And he said 3 words. He said, take it seriously. If you want to reword that in Arabic, what would you say? وَأَخَذْنَا مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. They've taken from you a firm covenant. He said, take it seriously. And then he said something interesting, baffling at first. He said, don't think of marriage any differently to how you would think to the purchase of a car. How come? He said, unfortunately, some people pay more attention to the buying of their car than they do when they come into marriage. And they do more research into their car than they do into their spouse and the institution of marriage. And then he gives an example. He says, if you were to ask an average young man, what is your ideal car? You will have it today. He will say either Ferrari, he will say Lamborghini. But then if you say to that young man that this car will be the first and last car that you will have to the rest of your life, all of a sudden the analysis now is a little bit different. Because the kind of car that you want when you're 20 or 30, he says, is a little bit different to the car that you want when you got 1 or 2 kids. Right? He says, take it seriously. Take it seriously. He is your paradise or hell, my sister. And my brother, Allah says, your wives have taken from you a firm covenant. Take it seriously. Quick question. What are some of the manifestations of people who don't take marriage seriously, who do the opposite of this principle? What modern day examples do we have? I'll give you a few very quickly. Those who are throwing around the word of divorce left, right and center. Like today I was in a marriage case and I said to her, how many times has your husband divorced you? She said, I have lost count. Triple talaq, quadruple talaq, uppercuts, hooks, everything coming my way. I've lost count. She said, so many. And he only does it in sets of 3, triple talaq each time. Is this a person who's taken the covenant of oath, the covenant of marriage as serious and weighty? And similarly, a woman who's constantly threatening, I'm going to apply for a khula, I'm going to apply for a khula. Whilst this is a valid door that's open for us when needed, but constantly throwing about in this disrespectful manner shows that you haven't understood that this is a firm covenant. That's one example. Example number 2, unfortunately, some of the dodgy Sharia councils that are out there here in the UK, who guarantee that we can separate your wife from you in 48 hours. Just pay the fee. One sister recently who said that I was divorced from my husband just by email. This Sharia council, she said, no face-to-face, no Zoom, no nothing. By email, just communication. And it was done. They gave me the divorce certificate. Is this a Sharia council that understands that this is a firm covenant that you've just broken down? How? Or a Sharia council that say we don't need to speak to the husband. A wife has applied for a khula. They say we don't need to contact the husband. Just let us hear your version of the story. What about his version? Next thing he knows, she's married to another man. What happened? My wife is married to another man. Yeah, but we've divorced her. Why don't you reach out to me? We don't need to. How? Allah says we've taken from you a firm covenant. How can you dissolve it in that way? This is a firm covenant. That's another example. Another example could be the interfering in people's marriages to break them down. لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ خَبَّبَ امْرَأَةً عَلَى زَوْجِهَا. The Prophet ﷺ said, any woman or any person who incites a woman against her husband is not from us. How can you interfere in a relationship in this way to separate them from one another when this is a mithaq ghalid, a firm covenant that you're interfering with? Right? Another example could be of somebody who comes into marriage and they don't know the mutual rights and responsibilities. They just fell in love, so they quickly got married. But they don't know the rights of a husband and the rights of a wife and the expectations and the roles and what Allah wants from both. You do a lot more due diligence when you take out the mobile phone contract. What about this firm covenant? We have not taken it seriously. These are 4 or 5 examples of how this principle is not applied. Finally, putting this principle in practice in the remainder of the minute or 2 that we have together, one way could be to raise awareness. So parents, speak with your children about marriage and use positive terms. Use exciting terms. Tell them about the good things that marriage offers. Prepare them for the weighty contract that's ahead of them, that comes with a responsibility, but comes with an enjoyment and a happiness. Show them that. Show them the bright sides of marriage through your behavior, through your example, and through your words. Teachers, with your students, parents, with your children, anybody who's under your influence, raise awareness about the importance of marriage and the enjoyment of marriage and the weight of marriage. And the last thing we can do is end all forms of mockery that is directed at the institution of marriage.